So welcome back to Headgears to Handshakes. I'm here with Joanne and Lucinda, and this is the first time we had two people on our shows, a very different angle, and I'm really excited to get to know you two and what brought you to the sport of wrestling and what you think others get from it. But to start things off, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so my name is Joanne, and I've been involved in wrestling, I'm just going to use decades instead of years, about 5 decades now. I started my involvement in college. I went to see a college wrestling match where I met the love of my life. I enjoyed watching him within a singlet, and then, of course, I knew him through college, and he wrestled, so I got an experience about wrestling, started to learn about it. And then we have 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons. At the time, girls weren't really wrestling as much. And our 2 boys began to wrestle. And it was an incredible journey for us, enriched our entire family's life, added a new dimension to friends and family, and people that mentors, teachers, everyone that joined in and on our journey made it just an incredible, enriching experience for our family. And my background helped with that as well. So we can talk about that too, if you'd like to know that now, or first find out about Lucinda and how she got involved.
My name's Lucinda. I got involved with wrestling, I guess it's about 4 or 5 years now, when my children started wrestling. I initially started my son in wrestling. A friend thought it might be a great sport for him, and we went to practice, and my daughter was like, "Hey, I want to do this," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess there are other girls on the mat. Sure, why not?" And she really took to wrestling. My son still wrestles, but my daughter's really the wrestler of the family, and I watched her fall in love with it, and it made me fall in love with it.
That's great. And you actually got into coaching as well, right? So you didn't know anything about wrestling, and you started watching, and you got in there and getting your hands dirty and trying to help these kids out.
Yes. I get really emotional when I talk about wrestling, just because I see how much it changes people's lives, both with my own kids, but with the kids that I now adopt every season. Sorry. You see them come in and they don't know anything and they're scared, but they want to learn. They have this passion, they have this drive, and then they go to the county championship and they get their hand raised in the finals, and you're like, you knew nothing at the beginning of the season and now you're a county champ. Wow. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm sure both of you have seen some people just grow with wrestling. I mean, is there anybody that stands out? I mean, you've been with Joe, well, in a relationship with him as his girlfriend to marry. How has he grown through wrestling? Even professionally, the things that you saw that, hey, he's definitely learning some things here with this sport that he's bringing into his business. What are some things you saw through that progress?
Well, I saw it through Joe and our sons, and our daughter learned from it as well, that, it's a individual sport as much as it's a team sport, and you're out there by yourself on the mat. You need to have the confidence in your physical abilities, your emotional stability while you're out there. And it's just a natural gravitation towards leadership skills. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it with all of discipline. They had to be disciplined to drill. I had to be focused on a lot of things. And that really helped them in their journey on their careers, for sure. Particularly, I saw our son, transition from a college graduate to becoming a member of our firm. And he was started in his little cubie, and he had the same signs up there, different, not one goal, one dreams, New Jersey state champ, but, goals, this many dials, this many reaches, see this many people. And they continue that discipline, the focus, and the ability to really stick to things while on his journey and his career, and it just catapulted them all.
Yeah, I see that too. And my kids are still in school, but I see, especially with my daughter, she's a sophomore this year, and she went from being kind of disorganized and not really having much motivation and drive to get her homework in. And now it's like the homework's done. I don't even have to ask her anymore because I know it's done. She's in an honors class with an A plus, and I'm like, who is this kid? And I really think that the motivation and the discipline that she learned in wrestling is now transitioning into her schoolwork too. And of course, there's a little bit of like, oh, well, if I don't do well in school, I can't wrestle. So there's that fear, but it's still related. And I'm like, man, this is just going to just go up from here. You know, she's going to carry this with her.
Right.
I've always thought moms, when they see wrestling from the outside looking in, never see it. It's just two people trying to beat each other up, and that's all they see. But what I've also found is when a mom has their kid in the sport and they see what they're getting out of it, they see them changing, that they're almost more into it than the dads, than anyone else. I mean, do you guys have some experience with that in terms of just the way you think about wrestling over time, of being around it?
I do. I think moms have superpowers. They do in a lot of ways. They could look at their child wrestling and immediately say, "Oh, they're not themselves." I can see something's up. Something's not right. You know, they're either not feeling good because they're not performing to their optimal level. They know when they need more sleep. They know what they have to eat. You know, they know when they just need emotional support. And some of it they give to other people, the coaches or their dads if they're involved, or another significant other. But I do believe that moms can really truly see, and at the end of a match, just like my mom used to do for me, not in wrestling, but you know, if I was in the choir singing by myself after my solo or before my solo, she'd look up to the choir loft and give me the old, okay, you could do this. And I think that a lot of wrestlers, girls, boys, they look to their moms or guardians and think, okay, you give them the nod, like, okay, I got you on this one. Go do your thing. And I think that's a real superpower moms have. You have that.
Yeah. I have something. I know. I'm not sure what it is
Oh, it's a superpower.
most
It's
days,
great.
right? Yeah. I mean, yesterday's the day was endless between practices, and we had a match, and then there was a wrestling meeting, and but you just keep going, and you make sure that your kids are prepared for the next day and that they're ready to give it their best.
That actually leads me to my next question. I was going to ask it even before you made that comment. It's almost perfect. But what is the hardest thing about being a wrestling mom that maybe people don't see? Like what? Because obviously there's challenges. Anytime you're in a supportive position, you're supporting your kid, you're supporting your husband, a coach, whatever it might be. It's tough. A lot of that weight falls on the wives, and people might not always see that. What's the toughest thing about being a wrestling mom?
For me, there were two things. One, making sure that they were physically healthy, making sure that with the sport being such contact on a mat, that they always kept their skin clean, and make sure that they ate well, because you hear stories about kids now that before that they would do all sorts of terrible things just to make weight. But now, both in high school and in college, there were more rules in place so that doesn't happen to them. But keeping them healthy. I mean, I remember there were times we would be in the kitchen and we would weigh a baked potato versus should I have two eggs, And I have a nursing background, so I knew they needed the protein. I knew they needed the carbohydrates, but not like getting ready for to run a marathon, not all the carbs because you're going to gain the weight. So keeping them healthy physically, that was challenging. And I think that the emotional part of it, when they had a loss or they were disappointed, I think it was challenging also to be able to say, listen, leave it all out there in the mat. You did your best. And that's, this be the next time where you try again even harder. So, and if you did your best, then you should be happy, So I think that was those two things, both the physical and the emotional, were both challenging.
I think for me, there's two that really stand out. The first one is constantly asking myself, am I doing the right thing? Am I taking them to the right practices, to the right places? Are they working with the right people? Are they doing too much? Are they not doing enough? Are we doing too much lifting and not enough practice, or too much practice and not enough lifting, or too many tournaments, or too many this or too that? And am I giving them the space to also be kids? That's I think the biggest, but also at the same time, like making sure that they're set up to achieve their goals and their dreams, supporting them in that. And that goes along too with the physical aspect of like, am I giving them the right nutrition? Am I providing the right type of physical therapy? Whatever the case may be. And then my second one is a little bit more probably critical because I do coach, and a lot of times I have to be the coach to my children, especially if we're going to tournaments that are away. It falls on my shoulders to be the coach. And it's really tough to be a coach and a parent at the same time, especially in a loss. Like, it's easy when they're winning, but in a loss, it's really tough because you want to give them the emotional support, but you also want to tell them, like, hey, you should have done this or you should have done that. And it's about finding that balance of, okay, let's cool off after the loss and not be emotional, and then be there for them as a parent first and a coach second, when you have to do both. And I've definitely been taught by my daughter a lot to be more quiet. There have been times where she's been mid-match and I've been yelling something and she will stop wrestling, look at me and go, shh. And so I'm like, oh, you can't do that, because if you do this, you're not wrestling anymore. So definitely learned how to be
I bet you learned.
Yeah, balance it all.
Yeah, I bet you learned quick because everybody saw that. They're the only ones out there. Yeah. I'll tell you a personal story. So my son did soccer, and I found out what kind of parent. Like I can't. There's no way I could coach my son. There's no way. And I just remember them sitting him because he wasn't very good, and he would kind of get bored and start kicking the grass or something, and I would be like, "Hey, focus! Your team needs you." I'm like that guy. And then I was trying to get him to join wrestling, and I could always tell, like, he didn't want to. I almost scared him into doing it or not doing it because he just knew how I was going to be. Because when you're a parent, it's like, and especially if you're a coach, it's you expect the best out of your own kid. Mm-hmm. Like, you would almost, if one other kid makes a mistake, it's not a big deal. But when it's your own kid, it's like you should be getting it right. Like. You know what's right and wrong. I don't know. I feel like you just hold your own kid up to another standard sometimes, right?
You have both layers, right? Mm-hmm. And especially, like, my son had his first match last night and he won. He should have pinned that kid in the first period. It came down to a major decision, right?
Yeah.
And it was the first match. He was rusty. He hasn't wrestled since last season. And we're on the bus ride home and I go, "So how do you think your match went?" He's like, "It went well. I won. It was good." And I was like,
Oh,
I was kind of
biting your tongue a little bit.
And I was like, but let's talk about it a little more. And when we got down to the end of the conversation, I was like, "Well, Mom, it was my first match. I was rusty." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. It was. You still should have been that kid in the first period."
Well, I like what you said about let kids be kids. And wrestling is sort of a generational sport, and I know that more now as Joe's involved with WIBN and the Natural Coaches Wrestling Association. And, he meets people who he wrestled their dads and, when he was in high school. So I think that's important as well, because it's generational, that kids need to be kids. So our older son, Michael, when he wrestled in high school, he also played soccer. Mm-hmm. And it was his senior year in high school, and he had to go back. In August they start soccer practice, and he had placed in the States the year before his junior year, and he wanted to, win and be a champ, but still possibly be a state champ, the first one in Mercer County. But when soccer practice started in August, he said, "I'm not going to play. I'm going to give all my time dedicated to wrestling. I'm going to go to, outside training and wrestling practice more." And so anyway, but during that time in August, he would be moping around the house while his friends were all at soccer practice. And we said to him, "Listen, if you want to play soccer, you've played soccer all your life. Just set your expectations realistically, that if you're not going to go to clubs and continue just wrestling, it's going to be harder for you to reach the goal. But if you're not happy, you should play soccer." And he decided that was right for him. And he was a captain, and he had a great season. The team won, their conference. And so, and at the end of the day, he was the athlete of the year for the school. But it was sort of for a younger son, Mark, who became the first state champ in Mercer County ever. He said, "You know what? I want to dedicate to wrestling." And he went to a lot of clubs, and he put the sign above, and he said, I learned from Mike so much, but I know what's right for me. And they were able to distinguish. And his brother said, Mark, if you want to be a champ, you're going to have to give it up. And he did. He gave up soccer, and the rest is history. He was the first state champ. So they have to do what makes them happy at the
Yeah.
same time. And if it's going to be a grind, and they don't want to make weight, and it's just they don't have a lot of people that fill the stands for wrestling, more and more now. But it's not like being on the football team, rah rah. And that didn't change even in college. When our sons wrestled in college, they would come home. Mike went to the NCAAs, and he came home, and he was one match away from becoming an All-American, and he lost. But when he came home and went back to school, I should say, that there wasn't like, hey, great job, where did you place? It was like, you got your essay is due today, I don't care. Meanwhile, if you played basketball for
Right.
University of Florida, the professor would say, no class today, they won the NCAA tournament. So they had to deal with expectations as far as wrestling and their accomplishments, and being praised for it like other sports. So I think it started with kids will be kids, and then they have to make a decision as they get older, and let them do their thing.
I think you just gave a incredible gold nugget there, because even as a parent, I struggle with that. Is you want some things for your kids. You might want them. You might have wanted him to be a state champ or sacrifice, but at the end of the day, it's his life.
His life.
And so for you to have that ability to just write it out. Hey, this is the reality. If you put more time here, you get better here. You spread it out. But you get the joy. But having that mature conversation with a kid when you might want something, and to still let him make the decision, that's huge. I mean, I think wrestling parent or not, that's something we could probably all take away with us.
Right, and you transfer those skills to your life with your own children. I see it with our children and their families, and how they allocate their time. Hey, there's time for a family to be together, and we're not going to take on sports that we have to be there every single Sunday. Sunday's our family time. And so I think it teaches you so many things that you don't even know you're being taught them until you're able to transfer them later in life, which is cool.
Yeah. And what do you guys do for work? Because we talked about what you did a little bit, and I want to hear more about that. I think everybody's going to want to hear about it. And then, how did you manage, doing that, or your role, and then also, supporting your kids?
You want me to go first?
It doesn't matter, yeah.
So my professional background was nursing. And I was both adult and pediatric intensive care nurse, and then a clinician in the nursing arena. So again, I was a little more tense about my children and their health and their nutrition, because I knew more than some other people did as far as keeping them, their well-being, and what they needed to eat and drink, and so on. So I was a pediatric nurse, and then we moved to Jersey in '83, and I held down the fort with two children, and the third one was born. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 9 years. And then I went back, instead to nursing, I transferred those skills of hands-on helping people to become the chief recruiting officer for our firm, Northwestern Mutual, and helped my husband build the firm in Princeton. And I was helping people decide on their careers, what was right for them. So I was able to use that, okay, what's important to you in life? Can you do this? Is this what you're looking for? Are you looking for a career with, where you're more of an entrepreneur? And I find that wrestlers are more entrepreneurial than other team players, other sports teams. So I did that for 25 years, and just totally enjoyed it. I have a little bit of a background role with Joe's continued involvement in wrestling. Number one, financially, when we donate, but also I've been involved in the background for WIBN. I was on the board at one point, and then Joe hosts all the meetings at our home, so I know everyone. We go to events together, and I help with their awards dinner, and just stay connected.
Let me ask you this. I got to ask you, how hard was it to be a stay-at-home mom? Because that's just a hard job, and you're crazy smart and successful. So, my wife's a chemical engineer, and she had to, stop pursuing some of her careers as I bounced around. That's just how it worked, and she sacrificed. And it's really hard. I mean, how was that experience, knowing that, you could be successful in any area. You're super smart. How tough was it to, take that core group at home?
It was tough. I actually do call it a sacrifice. I mean, like, generation before us, that wasn't a sacrifice. That was their role. My mom, she didn't go to work until we were, in high school. And so, and I went to work when our youngest was in second grade. I went back, but I took on a position where I had flexibility because it was our own business. And so, Joe would look at his watch and say, "Hey, kids, the bus is coming. The bus is coming." So I would make sure I left, and so it was challenging when I did go back to work. But I think it was a sacrifice for me because I loved nursing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay connected, but the hours at the time were not good for me, and so I say that to my children sometimes. I sacrifice for the family, but on the other hand, more importantly, I was so blessed to be able to be home when they left school. I was there with them when they came home to give them their snack, to do their homework, to hear about the day. And we always had dinner as a family. That was just because, again, Joe owned his own business. And I think that I know that my relationship with them is where it is, such a healthy place because of me having the ability to stay home, which was a blessing. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a sacrifice, but overall, the blessing was more important than anything.
That's great. Let's hear about the matchmaking.
Yeah, I work for Agape Match, and I am one of the senior matchmakers. I've been with the company for coming up on 10 years now, and I started at the bottom. I was doing the phones at first, and just responding to emails. Then I got into sales, and one day my boss was like, I think we need to try you as a matchmaker. I think you might be really good at this. And I did study psychology for 2.5 years. That was my major. And I came to a decision point, kind of like your kids did, where I was really passionate about theater, but the hours that I needed to be in the theater versus studying were too demanding for me to excel in psychology. So I switched my major. My mom was not happy, but I did it anyway. I switched my major to fine arts. And so I had this background in psychology, which I think is very helpful to matchmaking, but also much like wrestling, you have to thirst to learn and to excel at all times. And so I do feel like I have a natural knack for matchmaking, but also I'm always looking to learn. And I think one of the great things about matchmaking is you're helping people. And that's what I'm passionate about, is helping people. And, you can help people with their careers. You can help people with their love lives. And it's a lot of, like wrestling, you have to sit back and say, okay, what did I do right in this match? What did I do wrong? You have to self-reflect. And it's really hard to self-reflect. But you have to do the same thing in relationships. You have to look at yourself and say, okay, is my attachment style this or that, and what can I do to improve myself to be a better partner or a better communicator or make better decisions or prioritize what is important to me in a relationship and my values. And so there are a lot of parallels in matchmaking and wrestling, which is really interesting because I never thought that was a thing. I never really expected to find that, but I do. And as a coach, much like in matchmaking and coaching wrestling, you have to help people and guide them to see what it is that they really want and how they can achieve that. So it's pretty interesting.
I'm like attracted to matchmaking because I've seen so many movies where the matchmaker
Well, you're
falls
out of
in
that
love
scene,
with
though. I
somebody.
gotta
that
tell
they're
you,
making-
you're out. You got 3 kids.
Oh yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like, I've seen those movies.
Yeah.
I've always seen that job. I think it's interesting because I would assume in matchmaking you're really getting to know the people, right? To figure out what makes them click, where they belong, and I'm sure, and maybe you can draw on this a little bit. Maybe you do the same thing in coaching, and you really get to know them and what makes them tick, and you probably use both hand in hand, and it's probably helped you grow in both areas.
You have to listen a lot and learn. You have to be very perceptive and read between the lines in both. You might see a kid, you said this earlier, where that a kid's not wrestling how they normally do and something's off. It's kind of the same when you're seeing a child and they're in your room and they want something, but there's something that's not working. And you kind of just have a talk with them and say, hey, like, how's it going? How do just try and ask the hard question without asking it directly, because it is tough to talk about. And we do that with matchmaking too. We have to learn about the clients and learn about why they think this way. What sometimes there's a little bit of therapy that goes on. I mean, we're not therapists, but we do see like maybe something happened in their childhood that they're bringing into their adult life that is affecting how they view their relationships with other people. And sometimes we have to talk about that and see how we can navigate away from that, because it's causing a negative impact on their current life. So yeah, it definitely has parallels.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think for women in particular, particularly they are generally have better intuition. So moms, to wrestling moms, the coach knows and needs to know whether the coach is their dad or their mom, but the mom in particular, they kind of sense things. They're intuitive. They fact find. They ask questions. More than men generally do. I mean, example, if I play golf, when I come home with someone I didn't know, I could tell Joe, we laughed together on the course. We cried together on the course. I got to know, they have 3 kids, and then Joe will play with someone. I'll say, well, tell me what they like. He says, well, I don't know. We were playing golf. It's just a natural for women to just, they're intuitive and they want to learn more. Not that men don't, but, we do have different genetic makeups and certain things. So anyway, I find that's an important thing, to have that intuition about the kids when you're at home. And my husband happens to has that. He's always had, and in business in particular too. But I wanted to say that not only did my children grow into the people that they are today with their solid character and they're well-rounded, but I grew a lot from our family being a wrestling family. I grew up in the city of Providence, and I'm a pretty poor kid, and couldn't get involved in sports that required any money, and wrestling wasn't big back then. So I couldn't do tennis because we couldn't afford any of those lessons. So I played kickball and basketball, and I'm obviously 5'2", so it wasn't something I was going to pursue in the church parking lot. But as I always had an interest in, of course, from nursing, taking care of my body, so I would go to gyms once we were a young couple and once we could afford back then. But what I learned from my children was to be competitive in athletics, because I didn't have that opportunity as a kid to play on a team, and I competed in science and homemaking stuff, and I got scholarships. I was a pretty smart kid to get grants and stuff to college, but athletics it wasn't. So as I watched them, learn what it's like to be the best you could be, to train, to work out, I decided that I was going to turn my walking every day into running. And at 52 years old, I ran the New York City Marathon.
Wow, congrats.
And
That's
the
wild.
day after the marathon, I turned 52. And I was like, and that was a part of, what my family did for me. And they would, my last runs when it was dark at night, and I'm doing a 15-mile run, and I would drop goo and Gatorade in certain spots before I ran. And they would call me and say, Mom, where? I said, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. You can do it, Mom. Remember, you were there for us. We're going to cheer you on. And they all were there the day of the marathon. And it was, and it has a lot to do with wrestling.
Yeah, me too.
It has a lot to do with wrestling. And since then, I have always stayed competitive as best I can. Now I'm competitive in pickleball.
Yeah, you were there supporting them, and when it was time for them to support you, they were right there.
And that's been such a growing experience for our entire family. We support one another through thick and thin. Yeah, good times and bad. We've laughed and cried together over wrestling, some of the difficult losses that the boys, have witnessed, whether it's, Mike's last loss at the NCAA. We didn't see him for like 2 hours, and he was winning. He was winning 11-2, and then the kid went for it, and coach kept telling him to, get in there, shoot. And we were sitting in the stands. We were in Oklahoma saying, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should just dance around. He's only got like 15, 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
And boom, the kid shot. Mike went to shoot, and he flipped him and pinned him. And we were like, okay, let's give him time, and they have a loss. So that was a big one for him. It was the end of his career, senior
100%.
year.
Yeah.
And we, then when he came, it's times where you say, hey, you did, put your chin up, you did a good job, you worked hard, here you're here, you had the chance to do this, it's a blessing, and it all worked out. But and on the other hand, with Mark winning the state championship, the night before we were in a condo lodge down in Atlantic City, you all cramped in a room, and we were like, I said, Mark, how are you feeling? And so he said, I'm okay, Mom, I'm doing great. You know what? I figured I came this far. I'm doing the best I can. There are a lot of people here supporting me. I'm just going to give it my all. And I said, you're right. You brought a whole community here. You brought your grandparents, your teachers, our neighbors, your friends. I mean, you got a big crew here. So you go out there and do the best you can. So those are just lessons and stories that you just look back at and say, wow, you know what? We all grew from that. So,
Yeah, I feel like I'm learning a lot of lessons, but I want to ask you guys if you could give any advice in one sentence or two to somebody maybe that just got their kid into the sport, their family's just sort of entering it, they're at the beginning of their journey that you two have been on. What advice would you give them?
I would say keep an open mind about the sport of wrestling. They're in good hands with coaches. Stay involved. Whether you're going to be baking cookies or do something to raise money, stay involved. Learn the rules so that you could engage while they're wrestling. Not that you're coaching from the stands, but yell out the right things. I've been saying that. I just want to tell one more story. When my boys went to Brown, my mom and my family was from Providence, so my sister used to take my mom, their grandma, and my aunt to watch them wrestle. And my mom had seen them. She had been at the tournaments and the state championships, so she saw them wrestling before. But college was a lot different, and they were wrestling, Division I. And so my sister would be sitting there with them, and the boys would be wrestling, and one of them in particular, like if they're on their back and they're losing, my mom would shout out to them, Michael, Mom, get up. Why is he on their back? They were never on their back before.
Yep.
And we would, laugh about it. And then they see her after, and then she'd say, what happened? But then she'd just pat them on the shoulder and say, you did good. You did good.
Yeah.
Like, that nod, like, you did good. And so, and they respected her so much. They didn't like say, hey, so they'd give her a hug and say, thanks for coming, Grandma, So I think that, really getting involved as much as you can with their journey, making sure they stay healthy, emotionally as well as physically. I think that the moms will grow more than they can even imagine they would grow, and this experience will enrich their lives and their children.
I'm going to let you answer, but I just think it's great that you took the time to learn, right? Like that you mentioned that, like learn the rule. It doesn't mean you're yelling and coaching,
Right.
but when you know what's going on, I just think you can support more. You know the right things to say. And I just think that's a really good point that you made.
So.
Yeah, I offer my friends when their children start wrestling. In fact, on Monday I'm doing one. I'm like, oh, your kid just started wrestling, and they're like, yeah, I have no idea what's going on. It's like I'm overwhelmed, and I'm like, great. When are we going for drinks? I'll tell you everything. So I have a Monday night drink night to talk about wrestling with this new wrestling mom. Her daughter just started, and I'm gonna give her the down low of
If you want to do Zoom calls with the moms, I'd be happy.
Yeah, that'd be
do
fun,
that.
right?
I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
That's cool that you're bringing them in and you're kind of teaching them how it's done and what to look out. I think that's great that they're not going in blind. So I appreciate you doing that.
But there aren't as many resources. Well, we should give them resources if there are, where like Wrestle Like a Girl. But I think that WIBN has the resources. But if they could hear from other moms in some way, to make them feel, because you can't go and learn the rules of it's like football or basketball. I mean, everybody knows those sports. You could learn lacrosse, whatever, but it's a unique sport.
Yeah, a lot of moms bringing it, bringing into. They're the first ones, right? Like it's usually no other person in their family had ever done it. It's not something you don't stumble into a wrestling gym, and if you did, you see it from afar, and there's usually negative thoughts about it.
Right.
And that's changed over time. It's gotten better as we've had better practices, but and so I just think it is important to have that education. Or if you are a mom currently part of a program, like take the time if a new kid joins, go out with the mom. It's not just about the kids. We want to be able to support them as best as you can, just as parents, right?
Right.
Yeah, I always tell people wrestling is about family. You don't know this now. I tell the kids before the season starts. So we start our practices too. But what you don't understand is that the people that you're on this mat with, or that you know, maybe you compete on a team at Summer Nationals in Atlantic City, those people become your family. You might not talk to them all the time, you might not see them all the time, but you share this experience that other people can't understand, and somehow that you grow this large family, right? And it's about support, it's about caring, and it's about resiliency and supporting one another. There's a coach at another high school here in New Jersey, and you know, I wanted to kind of pick his brain about something, and he took the time out of his busy schedule, spent an hour on the phone with me, and he said, you know what, I coached your daughter one time, but she's one of my girls now. She's a good kid, she's a fierce wrestler, she's one of my kids now. And this is essentially an opposing coach, during the season.
Right.
But I do think, that's one of the beautiful things about wrestling is it's a family.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask this, but I'm really curious as to what your thoughts would be. What advice would you give a coach on how to handle a new mom entering the sport? If you had a magic wand and every coach could hear this, hey, anytime you have a new kid join your team, this is what you should do, or what you should say to this mom, or this is how you can best support your students by involving them. What would you say?
Give them the time and the opportunity to speak with you. And I know that's a lot to ask because time is important and there's only so much of it. But I think being receptive to just a conversation goes a long way, because it puts the parent at ease and it allows for a feeling of trust to build.
Yeah, I would also add on to that get to know how much they want to get involved. Give them the opportunity to say, listen, I work, I can't pick my kid up, I want him to get involved in wrestling, but I don't know how I'm going to get him home from school, because everybody has a story, something that's going on. So listen to them and learn about them. Take the time. It doesn't take a lot of time, to hear what their thoughts are, what their concerns are, and get them involved in the ways that it works for them. Hey, I can make cookies, or hey, I could man the booth for like the fundraiser, or yeah, you know what, can I help order the uniforms, or get involved in the way that works best for them, so that they could feel like they're a part of it, because generally they don't always feel like they're a part of the sport team.
So I was a Division I coach for a little over a decade, right? And I always felt like I could coach that kid better and get him further if I had a relationship with his parents or his family. Even when there was rocky times, I always tried to, and it was tough because you're dealing with young adults and they don't want their parents involved. And so up front, I'd always, if I could make a relationship, I was always able to help that kid more. It always seemed like if I tried to make a relationship and I kept those lines open, my relationship with the kid was always 10 times better. Yeah. And whether it was said or not, I would notice that I would get the most out of those kids and how to coach them. And it got to where, like, if there was things going on, parents would let me know, hey, his uncle died, and I'd be, I noticed a little difference in his wrestling, and I was literally about to talk to him. And like you said, every parent has their story. And so I think coaches taking the time, I think that's really important at any level. And again, I was doing it at the Division I level. I don't know if all the coaches do that, but that really helped me.
At all levels, even at high school. I mean, a wrestling newsletter, someone that could put something together to let all the other parents know what's going on, especially the moms or whoever the one that's totally involved with the athlete. I think communication is key in any relationship. Hey, we're going to be married 50 years next year. People ask me, and I say communication is really a big part, in trust. Well,
and by building that bridge to the families, you get to learn those tidbits of information about your athletes that helps you to be a better coach and a better mentor. But that also makes them feel like family. Right? And that's that nurturing family environment that I think wrestling, even though it's a tough sport, right? We're going out there and we're like, cross-facing. We're the only sport that has blood time, right? But we're still nurturing them. We're still supporting them. And I do really feel like this is the sport that there's so much, while there's a blood time, there's a lot of love time too, you know?
Yeah.
Just comes in a
Like
different
blood
way.
time and love time. I think that's a good thing.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, and I have to because if I have two strong women in front of me, what are your guys' thoughts on just the growth of women's wrestling? I mean, on all levels, you mentioned an organization, Wrestle Like a Girl. There's, women's wrestling is just blowing up. You're having female coaches. You're having superstar, like I know, Helen Morales. Like there's superstar wrestling names, right? So, I mean, what are your thoughts and how important do you think that is that it's that door's opening for females?
It's amazing. It makes me really, really proud. It's such an amazing sport, and there's no reason why females shouldn't be a part of it. And speaking to a lot of coaches that have coached both men's wrestling and women's wrestling, they always say that the girls are a different beast, and they come in there and they work really hard, way harder than the boys do. Funny enough, I think women we want to always excel at what we love, and we always give it 120%. And so, even the coaches last night, we had our high school coaches meeting last night, and or not coaches meeting, a athletic family meeting, and the head coach of the boys team, who's been the head coach for many, many years, he said, the girls, man, oof, they come in there, they know what they're doing, they're ready to go. The boys, we got to work on them. We got to get them to answer emails or, be prepared or show up. But the girls, they're there. They're there every day and they're ready to go. And if you ask them a question, they have an answer. So, I think it's great. It's great.
I do too. I mean, it wasn't there. It wasn't in vogue when our boys wrestled. In fact, when they had to wrestle a girl, they were damned if they won. They were damned if they lost. The boys would make fun of them if they lost, and if they won, it was like, oh yeah, but you just beat on that girl. So having women's wrestling in a lot of the colleges now, it's the fastest growing sport.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely amazing that as females they can wrestle. They wrestle other females, and then they're growing and learning and doing something that they love. I mean,
yeah, and I
it's
think
amazing.
in their future when they go into the work field, you can do it. You can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And it's funny. I always think back to my daughter's first ever wrestling match. She gets out there. She's so nervous. She's just terrified. Here she is. She had the little cap on, because you had to have your hair back. And she was scared. And she wrestled the boy. And the dad, right before the ref blew the whistle to start the match, he goes, "It doesn't matter. Give her hell." And I was like, okay, we're making this about gender now. And I got really, really mad. Like I felt so angry. And I remember but reflecting on it, taking that anger out of it and thinking, wow, if she can step out on that mat and not just be a female wrestler, but just be a wrestler, and she walks into an interview, she's not a female interviewee, she's an interviewee. She's someone who can excel at this job regardless of, what gender she is.
And still so much confidence in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think there's no better way to end it than that. I mean, that fires me up, I have two daughters. I hope they wrestle. I have one that's definitely going to be a wrestler. She's the quiet one, but she's like, she won't push you or anything, but if you go over the line, she'll let you know. And so I appreciate you two coming on. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, right? You guys had fun?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm doing it.
I appreciate it. And that's another episode of Headgears to Handshakes.